Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This particular story is called Poor Investment, written by Wall of Shadows. Cave of Teeth looked at the folk peddler with boredom. He had come up to its ship for some minor armor repair, and here it was trying to sell him a damned Deathworld monster. Rather, something it claimed was a monster. Folk were all the same. But you can clearly see it has the strength of a heavy wielder. Cave of Teeth raised his dorsal plates in annoyance. Not even Feck had the audacity to pull crap and Eater of the Swamp about high-gravity worlds. Armored bipedal slabs twice the mass of most sentients. They were a species one took few liberties with. Not as grav-adapted as your people, of course, it said quickly. It also sports. The peddler droned on. No matter what sad little accident from a dead-end world Feck had in their cargo hold, they always tried to sell them as Deathworld creatures. Extra strong, poison resistance, invisibility, magic appendages that when ground up and snorted doubled your reproductive success. Enormous bacterial... Wait, say that again? Well, fine, sir. I said that this particular specimen carries more than its own weight in parasitic and symbiotic microorganisms. In fact, even its very cellular structure is merged with... Feck that! Are you telling me that this sun-cursed piece of dry meat is a biological weapon? Shouted Cave of Teeth angrily. I assure you, sir, that it is not. We folk may be many things, but self-destructive we are not, explained the Feck merchant indignantly. None of these bacteria, save one, have any hope of infecting life on this part of the galaxy. Cave of Teeth continued to glower. Save one? Yes, save one. A particularly aggressive species that has colonized its skin. We were unable to destroy the infection, but we were able to edit its genetic code to render it temporarily unable to spread to known sentient species. It is likely a vaccine will need to be developed, though, as it shows a remarkable ability to evolve. Right, and why exactly do I need one of these, what do you call them again? A tiny glint was barely discernible in the Feck's eye. It knew it had made a sale today. Your people are known far and wide for their abilities as hunters and trackers, are they not? And do you not keep hunting beasts to help you track and kill? Well, sir, these humans are the perfect killers. Simply set them on the scent of your prey, and they will run them down and destroy them. I personally guarantee your satisfaction. Personally guarantee my ass, thought Cave of Teeth. No Feck caravan ever stopped on the same world twice as 16 orbits. How much? For the low price of 4,080 credits you can... Crap! Cave of Teeth's armor plates deflated suddenly. He wasn't about to spend more than a month's earning on the so-called Deathworld creature. Not when it probably couldn't even stand up swampside. Just give me my gauntlet and settle my bill. I see, muttered the southern peddler. He oversold and overcharged, and there was no way he was getting rid of this thing now. Well, I'll tell you what. We actually caught 3 of these monsters. One had to be put down before we could subdue it. You've seen the one that we have for sale, but the last one was defective. But at least it can be training for the beasts you have. I'm sure you don't get the chance to train them properly here in this quiet backwater. I'll let it go for, let's say, 1248. That with your gauntlet repair brings your total today to 1,504 credits. Cave of Teeth stared at the suspension chamber sitting on his landing apron. He still couldn't quite believe that son of a daylight had talked him into buying this worthless animal. Well, nothing to do now but test it out. He cracked the seal on the unit. He kept his RF discharge rod pointed squarely at the human, it was called. Whatever. He took a closer look. Cave of Teeth wasn't sure how well these single-use suspension tanks reanimated their cargo, but he thought that it should be waking up by now. Sure enough, he saw movement, barely. Crap. Just as he suspected, the trash animal couldn't even move in this gravity. It just lay there, whimpering. The damn thing was tiny, barely larger than a Feck. It sure wasn't furry like one, though. Just pale flesh, mostly coated in some kind of fabric. They must be from an especially hot world, he supposed, for the Feck to throw the protective wear without an additional charge. Cave of Teeth had gone far too long without a hunt. He didn't suppose this ridiculous excuse for a monster was going anywhere. But he pulled out his comm and ordered a combat drone to make sure it didn't do anything dangerous. He returned in a quarter rotation. The day's events must have taxed Cave of Teeth's patience more than he thought, because he found himself hunting more animals than he had planned. After so large a meal, he really hadn't wanted to see the thing he'd wasted so much money on, so he vowed to evaluate it first thing in the morning. When morning came, its condition hadn't much improved. It had gone from whimpering to something far worse, some expression of severe stress that he'd never seen before. It had soiled itself as well. At least it showed some signs of intelligence today. Its eyes met Cave of Teeth's with fear. He suppressed his hunter's instinct and roughly lifted the creature from the pod. It was far heavier than he had expected, which did suggest a high grab origin. But if that were the case, it should be able to pick itself up. Dismissing these pointless thoughts, he ruffled his plates and dropped the human casually to the ground. Over the next 1/16th of rotation, Cave of Teeth poked, prodded, kicked, and threatened and shouted at the helpless figure, coughing, sobbing, and leaking fluids from its eyes, nose, and mouth. Nothing. No sign of aggression, no sign even that it had the strength to move itself other than to cover its vital organs with its limbs. Disgusted with his own stupidity, he decided that feeding the monster to his snack pick would at least allow him to recoup a tiny portion of the money he'd sunk into it. Long, lean hexapods nearly the size of this creature. The Senpak could live for days on the dense meat his poor investment was made of. He dragged it closer to this enclosure. The beasts threw themselves at the barrier with mindless hunger. Covered in protective golden wool and sporting immense sensory organs on their oversized heads, the Senpak were good for one thing only. They would track prey over any terrain until they caught it or died. Cave of Teeth threw the creature over the barrier and watched it was quickly dragged into the creature's den. Cave of Teeth stared at his comm with hatred in his very soul. For the 16th time, maybe for the 4th times 16th time, he wondered why he still tracked. Most eaters of the swamp of his means, those who could afford a private estate on an out-of-the-way world, either retired or took occasional security contracts. But not him. For some sun-blighted reason, he had decided to keep taking bounties. Well, at least this one would be easy. A stupid mark hiding on an urban planet. All he had to do was track him down and flush him out. He sighed and strapped on his combat armor. His RF rod and a discreet photon weapon he wasn't strictly permitted to own. He wouldn't even need to take any of his support beasts, just one combat drone in case of emergency. Well, mainly in case a bored customs agent decides to try and inspect his ship. When he finally stopped screaming, he felt ridiculous. Of course, the combat drone didn't know where the Senpak had gone. It was a combat drone, a machine built for war, and he was treating it like an apprentice. But there was no one else for Cave of Teeth to blame. 2 weeks his simple job had taken, 2 weeks away from his villa, and when he came home, all he wanted was the opportunity to hunt prey. Then now he had to track down his blasted Senpak. Not only that, he had to determine how they had escaped their enclosure in the first place. He found their trail easily enough. A Senpak was good for many things, but stealth wasn't one of them. After a day of following it, though, he began to notice something strange. One of the pack had been leaving deeper footprints than it should have, but now it was different. For short distances, there was no sign of the deeper prints, but other strange patterns in the trail. Then a different beast would increase in weight. Cave of Teeth had no idea how this was possible. Until finally he caught up to the pack. They traveled faster than Cave of Teeth, of course, but without quarry to run down, they stopped to rest and play several times per rotation. He slowly lifted his head above the ridge to look down in the valley. There was his Senpak, but there too was the Deathworld. He had thrown it into the pack as food, and now somehow was part of the pack, and had run off with it. This would not stand. He marched down angrily, shouting orders to the suddenly frightened pack. Then impulsively, this human raised itself on its rear limbs and made a noise that sounded remarkably like defiance. Well, he knew what to do about that. He unslung the RF rod from his shoulders, planning one short burst of medium-high frequency, not enough to cook the damn thing, just enough to knock it down. As he did this, the creature took a small stone on its forepaw and rotated its limbs somehow. He wasn't sure exactly what it planned to do. Cave of Teeth awoke in the dark, his orbital shroud leaking blood. How the feck that monster launched a stone with enough force to accurately put him down, he hadn't the slightest idea. He realized he suddenly felt comfortable calling it a monster without laughing. Well, he knew now what he had to do. He might get some real utility out of the damn thing after all. Back at the villa, Cave of Teeth finished the reanimation cycle on one of his 3 very expensive cryo units. They contained his prized possessions, cranian warbeasts, standing nearly 3 meters tall and massing 175 kilos. The genetically engineered killers had been bred from giant flying creatures on a nameless Deathworld centuries ago. The genes responsible for growing wings had been rewritten to produce bladed arms with clawed digits. And the genes for teeth had been re-expressed. Few things in the galaxy could survive against one of these babies unarmed. Even Cave of Teeth needed his own comm to control the cerebral restraint devices implanted in them at birth. As he loaded the warbeast onto his hover skid, he wondered if this was strictly necessary. After all, this human did be a Deathworld monstrosity itself, but it was hardly dangerous enough to provide any training value. A slightly more self-aware eater of the swamp might ask himself if I were overcompensating due to fear, but Cave of Teeth was not known for his introspection. He finished loading the targeting data into the beast's implant as the skiff approached the scent pack. As he suspected, the human was still among them. No matter, the pack were formidable trackers and hunters, but they'd scatter as soon as he dropped the warbeast amongst them. Except that wasn't what happened. As soon as the beast turned towards the creature, the pack turned on it. Many of the pack died horribly, but not before they had ripped strips of flesh from the warbeast's body. The beast crushed the last of the pack with the tattered remnants of its leg, but it was too badly injured. It fell down panting, waiting for its master to put it out of its misery. Emily watched in horror. So many days of this waking nightmare, she'd entirely lost track. Well, that's okay. She learned what real nightmares were long ago. As the huge armadillo monster jumped down from its flying car, he pointed a metal stick at the honest-to-God dinosaur thing that had just killed her new puppies. All of a sudden, its face caught fire. On fire! And now the stick was pointed at her. She didn't know how she found the strength to pick up the club she'd found. She didn't know why she was so much heavier, why everything was so much heavier here. It took her a week to learn to walk again. She barely managed to hit this monster with a rock yesterday, but she picked it up anyway. The club that was shaped so much like a bat, as she walked towards the armadillo monster, dragging the club behind her. She stared with dead eyes as it rumbled at her. She supposed there was some sort of language, but it just sounded like an angry frog to her. She didn't know why she thought she'd reach the monster before he shot her with his fire gun. Of course, she wouldn't. But she also didn't think that the gun would just make her chest feel like she had a fever. It had set the dinosaur monster's face on actual fire, and it was just making her hot. As she got closer, of course, it started making her very hot. She knew she couldn't take much more of this, but there was one thing she could do. She could feel this heat, feel it just like when she was at bat and everyone was yelling at her, expecting more than she could give. It was hotter than the heat of shame. But it wasn't different. She lined up her shot carefully, so carefully, and dove her bat straight through the oval lump that was the monster's head. Covered in green, sticky blood, Emily sat down and cried. She didn't know what she'd done to deserve this. She'd always tried to be good, to be what everyone wanted her to be. But it wasn't ever good enough. And now here she was, on a strange world with a strange sky, covered in alien blood, surrounded by the corpses of the only friend she'd ever had. It just wasn't fair. She shouldn't have to feel this bad. She was only 12. End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.